Hi everyone, welcome to Watch It Play Table Talk Back. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this episode we're going to take a look at your responses to several different questions because our last table talk we called Topicopia because there were so many issues we wanted to look at. And the first one was a question about how we handle deception and other elements in games that relate more to the mechanics and how we either feel comfortable or uncomfortable with introducing those concepts to our children. Mr. Joe says, while a game can have a questionable theme, it is the learned behavior that I feel is dangerous. Most games teach positive things like taking turns, following rules, analysis strategy, and yes, sometimes dexterity. But games like Mafia, Werewolf, and The Resistance practice lying. As a parent, that's not a skill I want my kid to be good at, so I avoid those kinds of games. When Luke was growing up, and of course he's still growing up, but when he was younger, I avoided those kind of games as well for the exact same reason. I felt like it was unfair to try to give a child a set of rules for one circumstance and then change it for another. I think at a young age, children have a harder time compartmentalizing those kinds of concepts. And knowing when to turn that on and off, I think, is difficult for a child. So I never wanted to muddy or blur those lines for Luke. Now, as he's gotten older and we've watched more television, read more books, experienced more things, I think he has a better sense of what's fiction and not fiction, what's an in-game experience and what's an out-of-game experience. So we've started to introduce more of those games to him that involve lying, deception, and those kinds of skills, talents. I don't know what you call those things. And I think it's worked out. But that's something I'm still very conscious of, and I pay attention to when we're playing games and try to see how it affects his behavior. If I see it, extending outside of the game, it might be reason to have a conversation. But I think it's just an interesting consideration.
I run a board game club at the school that I teach, which is mostly junior high kids. And I don't find that there's any specific mechanics that I'm like, ooh, I can't really introduce them to that. I do find that a lot of younger board gamers are drawn to specific mechanics. They like a lot of confrontation, they like direct conflict. And even in a game of Carcassonne, I'm surprised to find them seek out those strategies that are directly confrontational, that some other gamers might not.
Right.
Other than that, it's mostly just the content of the theme. Is it age appropriate? But mechanics,
Right.
I haven't really found that at all.
Emmanuel D'Amatos wrote, I have no issues with games involving deception because my son understands that lying is only for in the game. The problem is that we know him too well for him to be able to deceive us, so it frustrates him more than anything else, and we just avoid those kinds of games. That was an unexpected but very understandable twist on this question. I hadn't really thought about that. But it makes a lot of sense. I think about when Andrea was a kid and we'd play hide and go seek, she would do this and think that she was hidden because she couldn't see us anymore. And so children can sometimes think they're being very clever, and actually as parents we can see right through it. So that either means that as parents we have to fake it, which kind of breaks the game for the adults, or you just end up winning all the time, which, as Emmanuel says, could be quite frustrating for the child. So I thought that was another interesting consideration in this particular topic.
Hi Rodney, I'm Michael.
And I'm Sean, and my name is Jordan.
In a game like Catan, where you have to steal things from other people, like when you're the robber, how old do you think you have to be in order to be like the robber and such?
It depends. If you know that stealing is bad in the real world, then yes. But if it's in that gaming world, it's okay, depending on the game.
So stealing is one thing, but what about lying? In a game like Shadows over Camelot, you have to be a traitor, and you have to lie to people. I know, crazy. Do you think that lying is something that maybe a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old should be learning to do in a game?
No.
No?
You'd have to be older, like 8, 9, or 10.
Oh yeah? Do you think you could play Shadows over Camelot? Do you think you could be the traitor? No? Maybe with a little parent help you probably could?
Maybe with a little parent help, but otherwise, no.
Yeah, okay. So is it safe to say that some of the games that we've been playing for a long time have, like, behaviors in it that we wouldn't normally do in the real world?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I guess that's kind of a decision that, do you think parents have a pretty big role in deciding what board games their kids play?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think that's our answer straight from the horse's mouth, so... Oh, we should end the video the way that they end their videos, right?
Right.
Are you ready? Thanks for watching.
The next topic we had was how you get rid of games that either you don't want anymore or just simply you've run out of space for. Pete Spooner wrote, "We have family games that we outgrow as the kids get older. As we get a new game, we take an old one off the shelf and we donate it. We know that some charities may not accept used games due to safety concerns, but we found that Goodwill usually does. Other places to consider donating are children's hospitals, senior centers, shelters, armed services, and a local church may be willing to accept and distribute games to those groups in need." Pete, it's very hard to find fault with this technique, and it's very thoughtful and generous. Not only are you giving these games away, but you're potentially helping to grow the hobby by sharing them with people who may not already be serious gamers. So I think that's a great idea. I've donated some games. Some games I'll charge for, especially if I'm giving them away to local friends in my game group. And when I say charge them, I'm talking about like $5 a game, maybe a little more depending on it. But the reasoning there is I want people not just to take the games because they're there. I want them to want it, or at the very least, think twice about the game that they want to pick up. And I think that people tend to value things more when it's cost them at least something. So that tends to be my technique.
All right, so the second topic or question was, what do you do when you have too many games?
I don't understand what you're asking.
I think he's asking if you had to downsize your collection, what would you do with the extra games you have to get rid of?
Extra games.
Would you sell them, trade them, give them away,
What?
or throw them in the trash?
Justin, no! You buy another shelf.
Yeah, we just buy another shelf.
Hey, a couple other locations that might appreciate board games would be like a library or a community center. I was just thinking about how I have both of those in my local community, and that is an area where people are coming together anyway and may actually take the time to pick up and learn a game. You might not want to leave your 80-page rulebook games there. Although, on the other hand, if you did, you could leave like a little note in the box and say, hey, I'm a local gamer too. Contact me here if you're interested. I mean, that's if you're open to having strangers reach you. Because I know for myself, it took a while for me to find the other gamers in my community, so it's kind of like leaving bait to discover the other gamers in your community. That's a pretty interesting idea. I might pursue that myself to try to help grow our local gaming group. Anyway, Tobias Zollner wrote, "When I sort out games because we don't play them anymore, I ask my friends and neighbors if they want to have it. When they say yes, they get it. I don't take money for it because normally I've had all the fun I bought for with my money." Tobias, I thought that was a very honorable approach. Oftentimes when I'm thinking about getting rid of something, I'm saying, hey, how am I going to get some value back from this? But if the value has already been gained through the experiences that you've had with the game, maybe that helps you just, kind of put your mind at ease when you're considering just giving the thing away, especially if you're using it for bait to find other gamers. Anyway, I thought that was nice. And I've recently had to give away some games myself because of my last year's gaming resolution for 2014. Last year at the time of this recording anyway. And some of you might be curious how that turned out. Well, I'm going to talk about that in a future Table Talk episode, and maybe also discuss my thoughts for a future gaming resolution for this coming year. Tune in for that if you'd be interested, but let's move on to the next topic, which was more of an observation about how when a reviewer posts a negative comment or critique on a game, that sometimes people will comment on, hey, we really appreciate your honesty. And my question was, is being critical any more inherently honest than being positive?
In terms of board game reviews and such, I do believe it is inherently more truthful. For the reasons I'm first thing I would like to state is I am one of the people who, like example, Tom Vasso's Lagoon review put down the comment that I appreciate his honesty and everything. I like the fact that he can criticize. He's a critic who can criticize, not because it was negative. I would like to put that out there. But it is inherently more truthful because it is just harder to say negative things. And I truthfully think that any of the reviews that Tom does which are negative are far harder to write, the write-up, right, than it is to do a positive review, because one, people are going to jump on your case. Two, when you say something negative, it is always harder because you have to explain yourself far more than if you said something nice. There are a lot of reviewers about it. If they get to the top and they're nice, people send them free games and everything, rather than if, let's say, they did criticize someone and let's say a designer is petty enough that he said, oh, I'm not going to send you any more stuff because you said something bad about one of my games. So inherently it's always easier to be nice. And that's also the reason why people like Simon Cowell, Gordon Ramsay and such, because they dare to say the things that no one else dare to say, which differentiates them. On top of it, because it's hard to say the hard thing, and to give a shout out, like a good review that is not just about negativism and all that. To prove this example, I will give a good shout out to Weapons Grade Upgrades, Matt King Ludwig review, and Joe Eddy Drive-Thru Reviews, Rorschach's Blacklist, which I think of is two very nice videos that shows that kind of, it's hard to say, but I'm gonna say it. So that's my view, Ronnie. Thank you very much for your great videos. Until next week, I love Necromunda.
I don't know how to make this distinction. I understand how people are saying that if you offer criticism of something, it creates an appearance of balance, critical thinking, etc. But stating something critical doesn't necessarily mean you've done any more critical thinking. For example, I hate blue cheese. I'll be honest with you, I've never had blue cheese. There's nothing in stating something critical, even if I was to be very detailed. I don't particularly like blue cheese because of the texture of it, the taste in my mouth, the coloration of it I find off-putting. See, I'm giving more and more details, but it's still no more honest because I've never actually had blue cheese before. So I want to be careful here. I'm not saying that people who are critical are being dishonest. What I'm saying is criticism is not a sign of honesty any more than necessarily praise is. Criticism can still be motivated by other things, such as, let me give you an example here. Shadow Scribe wrote, I don't think criticism is more truthful outright, but I do think we are skeptical of positivity because we're used to people just being nice, right? In other words, they don't want to say something negative because they don't want to be mean or hurtful, so they're kind of holding back, right? While it's possible to be deliberately mean, in a review, that's a more awkward motivation outside of comedic or activist values. The key piece I want to pull from what Shadow Scribe is saying here is just the acknowledgement that it is possible to be deliberately mean. That although it may seem absurd, why would someone hold something personally against a publisher? That is possible. And I should clarify, I'm not thinking of anyone, I don't know of anyone who would do that, or any review that was motivated for that purpose. And even just talking about this aspect of it pulls me away from even what I was trying to propose, and that is whether a person's being positive or negative. It doesn't tell us anything about what's going on beneath the surface, what's motivating that person, whether that's honesty or dishonesty. There's just no way for us to know from that. I think the key point here as well, from what Shadow Scribe is saying, is that people find that criticism helps satisfy their internal skepticism. That when someone's being both overly positive or overly negative, that triggers our skepticism, because an overly negative person, you might start to think, well, does this person have an axe to grind? And so when there is that mixture of both positive and negative comments, I think it satisfies for many of us, again, that feeling of skepticism that we might have. But again, whether it's satisfying that sense that you have or not, I don't think in reality it tells us anything about the inherent honesty of what's going on beneath the surface. It doesn't mean that criticism is not important or valuable. And let's talk about that for a second. Seth Van Orden wrote, I would say I appreciate negative reviews more, not because I think they are more honest, good, but because they are more helpful determining how to interpret the reviewer's reviews. I can see value in this as well. We're never going to be able to pierce into someone's unique, individual, subjective perspective on the world. But the more you watch someone, the more that you see their opinions on different things, hopefully it does help provide a fuller understanding of the palette of their opinions and thoughts and their processes and how they react and respond to things. And that can certainly be valuable. Of course, the thing is, even once you feel like you've pegged someone, you understand what they like and don't like, human beings are complex and often self-contradictory creatures. So even that does not necessarily prove that what someone else likes and doesn't like is going to be similar to what you're going to like and not like.
And I think it could have to do with how a lot of people dance around negative comments and try to put a positive spin on them, which can kind of seem maybe disingenuous.
That's true.
So when people just come out and say their negative opinion, then it kind of makes you feel like they're not trying to tiptoe around it. You have to take people's opinions for what they are, just our opinions. And usually what you want to do is watch a lot of reviews on the game you want to watch, and then put all those opinions together, and then make your own decision. Yeah.
And anytime someone gives you an opinion, you need to see the reasoning behind it. So even if positive or negative, if you're going to, review something and give an opinion, tell the people why, because that's going to give credit to that opinion.
Right.
Yeah. Plus, I find that a lot of reviewers get criticism for not being negative. And a lot of reviewers respond by saying simply, we're doing this for fun. It's not going to be fun if I'm putting all this work into a game I don't enjoy.
Right.
Yeah.
And another side to that coin is, like, we just do it for fun.
Yeah.
So we actually don't get games for free from publishers. We research the games we want to buy. We buy the games that we think we like, and then those are the games we review.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, what are the chances that we're going to buy a bad game? In our opinion.
And then play it over and over and over again enough that we can review it and do the overview.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems like a negative one.
I think you're telling the truth. I like your honesty.
Super Cheese wrote, "Really, Rodney? You don't share your opinions on games? You carried a copy of Red 7 around in your pocket all the time at BGG Con." I certainly did. And unless I'm going to lock myself away in a room and never play games with people, especially at a convention, then personal glimpses of my opinions on games are going to get out there, and I'm okay with that. I just never wanted to use this platform, my YouTube channel, as a way of promoting, potentially influencing people's opinions on games because of my own personal biases and opinions on games. That's just not something that's interested me or not something I've ever felt entirely comfortable with. But if you see me at a convention, I love talking about games and my likes and dislikes, and I'd be happy to do that with you one-on-one, because then I can sort of gauge your reaction, what you're taking from what I'm saying, and I can then put it in a context. And certainly that's something that was missing from Red 7, or Rod 7, as some people took to calling it, because of how often I was playing it. If you saw all those pictures and other people's comments, and even my own comments, you might have thought, wow, Rodney must think this is the best game ever. Let me put it in context for you. I was actually taught Red 7 by my friend Chris, who was traveling with me. And as soon as he taught me there, in the plane, on the tray of our plane seats, I thought right away, wow, this is how ideal. It's so mobile. I can teach this game pretty much anywhere. It was a game that was new to me, so I wasn't burnt out on it. I thought this is going to be new to other people, so they'll have sort of just a natural interest in saying, well, what's this all about? And I can carry it around in my pocket, and it was super quick to teach. So in many ways, it was the ideal, almost perfect convention game. What does that mean? Does that mean I like it more than Kemet? Do I even like Kemet? Who knows? It's a mystery. But there you go. There's a little glimpse, a little insight into Red 7 and why it was so appealing to me at that time. And I still continue to play it. And there you go. You got a little sense of an opinion from me on a game. We won't let that happen too much. But now let's move on to the next topic. And the next question we asked is, do you play games remotely? And how do you do it? David Fears wrote, "The Vassal engine has a lot of games that can be remotely played, like Arkham Horror and X-Wing, to name a few." David, I know so little about the Vassal engine. I think I might have used it once before. What I do know is it's not named after Tom Vassal, which I used to think. And like you said, it's an engine. People create these modded versions of the tabletop game that you can then load into Vassal and then play on your PC. I think Google's your friend. Tabletop Nerd wrote, "My co-host Quentin lived in Vancouver for school and we played remotely quite a bit. We used Skype and a webcam and mostly played co-op games. It was an opportunity for us to hang out because we were so far apart and still wanted our gaming fix." This is the same motivation I have for remote gaming. It's not because it's easier, because it isn't. And it's not because it takes less time, because it doesn't. Usually it takes a little more time setting things up, and even playing takes a little more time. You usually have to communicate a little bit more. But it allows me to game when I otherwise wouldn't be able to, and with people that I wouldn't otherwise be able to game with because they don't live near me. So for that, it's wonderful to be able to do. And people ask me kind of what equipment I use. Let me just quickly tell you. Oftentimes what I'll do is set up a tripod sort of beside the table, and I'll try to position that more centered on the game pieces, and I'll sit a little off to the side. And then I like to use the Logitech C290. That's a webcam that actually has an adapter so you can screw a tripod mount into it. And that way I can have it like quite high up off the table, pointing down and then running over to my laptop. But that way the other players can see everything that's going on the table. I can manipulate that for them if they need that. And I try to use a headset that's mic'd I don't recommend using kind of like the open air mic on your laptop or something, because then you pick up a certain amount of feedback, you get extra noise in the room that people have to listen to. So I find that miking your headset is the best way to do that. Anyway, hopefully that's a couple of other tips. People left some other tips in the comments. You can check those out as well. The final topic that we looked at was, do you have a Grail game? And if you acquired it, did it live up to your expectations? Emmanuel Demotis wrote, I had one, Stop Thief. It's a game of deduction. It used a nifty electronic sound producer to give you clues. I finally bought it used on eBay. It was a sentimental purchase, but we still play it occasionally. I had to mention this one. My brother had this when I was growing up. My brother's 16 years older than I was, so he had what to me was a bunch of cool toys. And Stop Thief was one of those. I had no idea how to play it. I had watched him occasionally play it. I just loved playing with a little computer thing and pretending I knew what I was doing, and it was great. So I loved having that memory brought back to me by your Grail game. Gary Stitley wrote, I don't remember the name of my Grail game, making it harder to obtain. You fought with mechs and used dice for combat and filled in circles on a piece of paper as you took damage. I'm pretty confident I know what this is. Probably Battletech? I believe I played this when I was younger as well. I'm just filling in those circles was so much fun. Even though it was like a bad thing, taking damage, it was kind of neat seeing your mech kind of visually destroyed before you. I'm pretty sure they have new editions of this game as well. It's something you might want to look into.
And my Grail game is a game back from 1995, and I had friends who owned it, and I always played it with them. As college ended and different careers changed, and I changed circles of friends and such, all of a sudden I didn't have this game anymore, and then I started to have this like itch to play it, and it was out of print. I was like, oh no, and then I went online. This is why it's the Grail game. You go online and these games sell for like a couple $100 for a factory unopened set, but it was that important to me to play the game that I went ahead and I've shelled out way more money than it was worth retail in order to get the game, and that game is Game Workshop's Dungeon Crawler Warhammer Quest. It is, in my experience, the best dungeon crawler that's out there. I think it's still the best dungeon crawler that's out there for a myriad of reasons. I love the ability to, and I know that other games have since mimicked it, but I love the ability of the solo gameplay. If I find myself, Saturday afternoon, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do a dungeon and advance my character some more, then, that's great. It's a fantastic board game. Its ability to run with a DM, without, you can get 4 or 6 people to play along with you. It takes a long time sometimes to get through the dungeon, so it's a good way to burn through a night. It's a fantastic game, and I really recommend it. The game comes with a ton of models and plenty of expansion packs out there. The problem is it's expensive now, but I think that if you are a money is no object kind of person, then I think this is a pretty good game to grab a hold of. Anyway, Warhammer Quest is my Grail game.
Another topic was Grail games.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Grail games?
Well, Grail games are interesting because you really want them, but how much are you willing to shell out for them?
Right.
So one thing I tend to do is any games that we do want to trade, I'll put onto the Board Game Geek for trade, and I'll put the Grail games that we're looking for as top of our wish list. And then a lot of searching and research, it does become a bit of a quest. Can we find one for a good price? When one comes up for a really good price, do you snag it right then and there, or do you check the balance in your bank first?
And there is a thrill of the chase.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get a little caught up in it sometimes.
Yep. Some of the Grail games we've picked up, we've got Palaces of Carrara that we got an import.
Yes.
Yeah.
From one of our favorite friendly online gaming stores who imports.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And then we really wanted to get Vikings. We kept hearing about it,
yeah.
And then they reprinted it. So
because we thought we would never get it.
Yeah.
And then they reprinted it this year, and
which is awesome.
Just got it.
Yeah.
And then our Grail game of all Grail games, Manila. And you asked us how you feel when you get your Grail game. I think the look on my face says it all.
Pete Sherry writes, my Grail game was Star Wars, The Queen's Gambit. I was lucky to get a copy still in shrink last year and have since started getting it painted and ready to play. The chase was definitely the fun part. The thrill of bidding on the game and searching through thrift stores and online for a decent copy was exciting, but acquiring it felt like winning the Super Bowl. That is exciting, Pete. I have to say, I sometimes wonder if that thrill of the hunt, and even just sort of having that desire to have that thing, if that isn't almost more fun, more exciting and stimulating than the actual acquisition itself. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Mynerik wrote, my Grail game for a while was Glenmore. I watched Rado's videos and was just enamored with it. I finally got it a few months ago, and while I really enjoyed it, I think the hope and hype may have lifted my expectations too high. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. And it's understandable, especially if your Grail game is something from your past, when you were younger, because it's hard for those sentimental memories to live up to who you are today. Now that said, in the last Table Talk episode, I shared that my Grail game was Necromunda. This was a game that I played when I was younger. It was my first miniatures game, and it's out of print. It's impossible to find, and I foolishly got rid of it and regretted that ever since. And I went to my game group that following Wednesday after I posted that video, and lo and behold, Renee, one of the gamers there, had been, unbeknownst to me, putting together a copy of Necromunda for me, like finding people who had like maybe some of the rule books or some of the components and cobbling it all together for me. And she presented Necromunda to me, this is just the box cover, at Game Group. It blew my mind. I was so overwhelmed. It was such a wonderful thing for her to do and very exciting. The only thing she wasn't able to acquire was the gangs. I posted on Twitter and Facebook about this, and a bunch of viewers kindly and generously responded to me, let me know of some miniatures they had to give away or to sell. I bought a gang myself online, and then all these, again, miniatures started coming in from people. I want to say a quick thank you to a few names. Tim, Sven, Cole, Gregory. There might have been one other. I'm not sure. Forgive me if I'm forgetting your name. Thank you so much for sending along these kind gifts. I want you to know I've already been digging into the rulebook and preparing myself so I can get this to the table with my local game friends. And in fact, the person who gave me this put together copy of Necromunda also has Necromunda themselves. And so I have at least one other person who's really excited and anxious to play this game with me. So these are going to get played, and I'm really happy about that. So sometimes getting your Grail game is just as exciting as the thrill of the hunt. Well, that really was a big batch of topics, and I want to thank everyone for their time and for their thoughts that they shared in videos and in comments. And let's continue the conversation. If you have some other thoughts based on what was said here, put them in the comments below. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.